And we'll have to figure some things out about consensus. Like, what if, 6 people want to send a given letter saying you should do this, and the other 4 people, hopefully we'll have eventually more than 10 people, and the other 4 people want to, send a letter saying you shouldn't do that, how much consensus do we need before we send a letter, well, I think we can agree not to lie, right? And if someone starts habitually lying, then we can, I don't know, ostracize them in one of those vague social structure ways I keep mentioning. But eventually it gets to the point where, just like on Wikipedia, if something's on Wikipedia, you can pretty much trust it, right? You will send out a letter to somebody and say this is signed by 6,000 members of the Enation, right? And that'll be pretty much authoritative. And then if someone doubts it, they can, I don't know, maybe we'll have a website or contact us in various other ways. But we don't need a website immediately. We can just live out on the internet. But eventually we start speaking for the general group, and then we'll have the splintering thing within Enation, and people you can be members of like 16 different groups at once if you feel like it. You can be, people won't even call themselves Enation or call themselves a branch of Enation, or we are Enation, or an umbrella of Enation, or Enation specifically, and it gets kind of complicated. But complicated in a way that no one person has to figure it out anyway, so it works out, right? But doing each little thing at each step of the way. So we start with a badge, right? So I'm going to put up on my various profiles on the internet. I can just start with text. You don't even need a cool HTML majig. I'm just going to say, I'm a member of Enation, enation.ning.com. You just put a little badge there. And maybe maybe someone out there can do a logo. If you have the resources to make a little logo, then you go ahead and do it, right? If anyone can do that, go ahead. And here's the thing: if nobody currently can do it, then we'll just start growing the community and stuff, and our badges and stuff will spread the word, and eventually we'll meet someone who can. And if we ever want to do a website, eventually we'll meet someone who can do a website. And if we ever want to do, this is the ad hoc nature of it. You each do what you're most capable of doing at the moment you decide on action, which is, again, why I'm making this video right now, because this is the best thing I can think of to do at the moment, right? I can't build a website immediately from scratch and all these things. It probably wouldn't be worth my time. I'm not that good of a programmer, etc., 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 etc. Okay? So maybe someone will design a logo, and then maybe we'll put up the logo, or maybe not. There's another thing with the no coercion. We don't want to say, okay, you have to put up the official Enation banner on all your online profiles, or you're kicked out. That would be kind of prideful of Enation. Like, oh, I feel so upset if people aren't officially declaring their allegiance to me. People can be in and out to any degree. Some people will be seriously in there, and they're Enation evangelists, like you said, Perry. And some people will be kind of in there, and they call themselves citizens, and some people aren't really citizens, but they browse around a lot, and some people just hate us, and some people, it's a spectrum. And you can put yourself anywhere on that spectrum as you want. Because, hey, if you're not bothering anybody else with it, you're just expressing your own opinion of how much you are committed to Enation or various splinter group thereof, etc., etc., that's perfectly fine, right? So we can start having discussions about things we want to say and do, and we can say anything to anyone. This is a great thing, partially because of the internet. You can communicate to anyone. We can even say things that wouldn't particularly have any force at the moment. Like we can say, a letter to Russia, please stop murdering journalists. Or might even have a debate about whether or not those mysterious deaths of all those journalists in Russia recently were murdered, or, it was all just accidental. I don't know. I, for one, think there's a lot of mysterious things going on there. Or, just send a letter to, like, any dictatorship. And, we don't like the fact that you're a dictatorship. And by itself, that doesn't seem to do much. But, at least we make a stand, and someday those stands will have meaning, Someday, through a crazy ad hoc thing, like I was saying with that example with the policeman, again, that Perry mentioned, we start influencing people. We start influencing maybe governments even someday, right? Maybe someday we say to said nation, state, or whatever, we don't like whatever you're doing. Let's say I don't know. They have bad environmental policies. I'm like, well, we don't like what you're doing, and if you keep doing this, then all the members of the Enation won't like you, which actually means something if there's a bunch of members and then suddenly, various companies stop doing business with this country, Like, oh, and then various groups start focusing on this country because they've heard from Enation that, they're doing bad things, and they start putting all sorts of political pressure on the guys in charge, and we start, The nice thing is, this thing is completely scalable. We don't need to be a giant thing influencing governments, which we may someday be. At the moment, we can just be us influencing, if no one else, each other, right? It's a place, at the very least, it's a place where we can come together and just talk about stuff, When we ask what should the E-Nation policy be, we're essentially asking what's right and wrong, and we'll start figuring these things out. You think, how could anyone ever figure that out? People are just going to have debates, and they're going to go on forever. We're not really going to know. Yeah, but think about how Wikipedia works, right? People have various debates on even the facts of a thing, but they go this idea and that idea, and all these things come together. They talk, and several arguments later, the thing starts forming into a pretty factual article, all right? Well, what if we talk, and we eventually start coming up with these ideas that are generally morally right, and morally accepted, and people start saying, if E-Nation told me to do this, then that's probably a good idea, because I know there's been a lot of discussion about the ethics of various things on E-Nation. It doesn't even all have to be necessarily about ethics per se. Like, we could, for instance, if some popular show got canceled, E-Nation could decide to get that show back on the air. If there was that much support for it, we could influence various small things, like, as I just mentioned, each other. I like that idea. Let's start talking. Let's figure out what our policies are, what E-Nation feels about various things, Like, here's an idea. The genesis of much of this is we at E-Nation, well, we recognize, since the people at YouTube have set up a website and server and everything, that they have the right to, do what they want with the videos. We recognize that. However, we don't like the idea that they're able to take down videos without any sort of appeals process. We don't like the fact that they can control things, even though they may technically have the right to. Now, there's an idea, and you may agree with it, you may disagree with it. How we feel about YouTube. We could talk about, there's some report recently about privacy online, and apparently Google is one of the worst companies when it comes to privacy, which is scary because I have a Gmail account. So, yeah. But, we can start talking about how we feel about Google, how we feel about privacy in general, and what rules do we think that privacy, that privacy on the internet should go by, and then we could come up with several documents and stuff and videos and things expressing our opinions and eventually sending out letters to people. This is how this whole thing starts. We can talk about any issue affecting us. We'd send letters to politicians. In my country, we got a presidential race coming up. We could analyze the various candidates and all the various issues, and there's a lot of issues to talk about, and things would go on for a while, I'm sure. Just like Wikipedia, the article is never done being edited, and no issue is ever going to be done talked about. But it's a place to talk about it. It's a way of talking about it. Just an idea, the idea that we should talk about stuff and come up with stuff and figure out what our consensus is, and then lobby somebody somewhere to start doing whatever ought to be done, telling someone to make a certain feature on a website, if maybe be, or to renounce some certain law that we don't like, or add some certain law that we do like, or maybe, we start doing these things ourselves, and we find someone within E-Nation who can make some feature on some website, or someone within E-Nation who actually happens to be a congressman, and they can start influencing the laws, and they can start, very interesting.